The first time he saw her, she wasn't trying to be noticed. She was leaning against the counter of an empty cafe, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, eyes fixed on something outside, or maybe nothing at all. The late afternoon light caught in her hair, turning the faint strands of silver into something almost deliberate. He'd only stepped in to escape the drizzle. Yet the moment their eyes met, the air shifted, like the pause before thunder. She smiled, polite but distant, and he nodded, pretending to study the pastry shelf. His throat felt too dry to order. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice low, a little rough at the edges, the kind that makes silence afterward feel heavier. He managed a yes, please, though it came out softer than intended. She poured, slow and careful, a habit born from precision rather than hurry. Her sleeve slipped slightly, revealing the faint line of a scar on her wrist. He didn't mean to stare, but she noticed anyway. Her mouth curved, not into a frown, but something knowing. "I own the place," she said, sliding the cup toward him. "So if it's terrible, you can't complain." He laughed quietly, the sound unfamiliar in the stillness. The rain began tapping harder against the windows. A dull, rhythmic sound filled the space between their words. "You're new around here," she said, not asking but stating. "Yeah, just moved 2 blocks down. Then I guess I'll be seeing you often." There it was, casual, harmless. But he heard something underneath it, the same undercurrent that made her eyes linger half a second too long. She crossed one leg over the other, effortless and sure, but he noticed the small tremor in her fingers when she reached for her necklace, a quick adjustment, like a reflex. He wanted to ask her name, but somehow it felt too intimate, like crossing a line he couldn't cross. "Do you always stare like that?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from her cup. He blinked, caught. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's fine," she interrupted, her tone soft. "It's just rare to be seen." That word, seen, hung between them. She looked up finally, meeting his gaze without hiding. Her eyes had the calm defiance of someone who's been looked at too many times, but rarely understood. He couldn't look away. When he finished his coffee, he stayed seated, pretending to check his phone. She was closing the register, her back to him, but she spoke without turning around. "You can stay a bit longer if you want. It's quiet here when it rains." He wasn't sure if it was an invitation or a warning. The clock ticked. Outside, the world was gray and blurred. Inside, her perfume lingered, warm, faintly floral, like the memory of something expensive but familiar. He stood finally, hesitated. "I'll come by again," he said. Her hand froze mid-motion. Just a breath, a pause he almost missed. Then she nodded. "You probably shouldn't. But you want me to?" She laughed, softly, nervously, a sound that didn't match her composed face. "You shouldn't ask questions like that." "I don't mean to." "I know," she whispered. "That's what makes it worse." For a moment, neither moved. Her eyes dropped to his hands, then back to his face. The distance between them felt fragile, like something that could be broken by a single step forward. Then, the sharp buzz of her phone broke through the quiet. She glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable. "Go," she said, turning away. He did. But when the door closed behind him, he saw her reflection in the glass, still watching, still smiling, as if she hadn't meant any of it. And somehow, he knew he'd be back. He came back 2 days later. Not on purpose, he told himself. He just happened to walk by. The rain had cleared, the air smelled like wet concrete and orange blossoms, and somehow the small cafe felt like the only warm place left in the city. She was there again, sitting alone this time, a book open but unread. The afternoon sun slid across her face, catching the faint lines near her eyes, the kind carved not by age but by living too carefully for too long. When she saw him, something flickered, surprise at first, then that half-smile that seemed to say, "You shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did." "Back already?" she asked, closing the book. "I told you the coffee was good." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't say that." "I meant to." He sat across from her before she could protest. She didn't tell him to leave. He learned her name, Elena, a name that felt older than him, heavier somehow, like a word that carried memory in its sound. She told him she used to teach literature before she opened the cafe. Teaching was easier, she said. You could pretend people were listening. He smiled at that, and she smiled back, though hers faded too quickly, like she regretted letting it show. "What about you?" she asked. "You look unanchored." He laughed softly. That's accurate. College. Dropped out. She didn't ask why. He liked that about her, that she could sit in silence without trying to fix it. Later, when she went to refill his cup, her hand brushed his. Just a light, accidental touch, but it lingered. He saw her catch her breath, the faint tremor at her wrist. Neither of them moved. He wanted to say something, anything, but the right words didn't exist for what that moment meant. She pulled her hand back slowly. You're too young to look at me like that, she said quietly. He met her eyes. Too young, or too honest? Elena exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Both. The clock ticked again, always ticking in that cafe, like a warning. He learned small things about her. The husband who left years ago but still sent postcards from places she never wanted to visit. The son who lived in another city, too busy to call. And she learned that he was renting a tiny apartment above her friend's shop, that he wrote songs he never finished, that he liked to walk at night because it made the world feel quiet. Enough to think. They weren't confessions, just pieces small enough to hide behind. But the space between them had changed. When he left that evening, she walked him to the door. The street was still damp from the morning rain, their reflections blurred in the glass. She reached out, just for a second, to fix the collar of his jacket. Her fingers grazed his neck, and he felt it everywhere. Good night, Nathan, she said softly. He nodded, his voice caught somewhere in his chest. As he turned to go, she hesitated, one hand still on the doorframe. You shouldn't come tomorrow, she whispered. He stopped. And if I do? She looked at him then, eyes steady but full of something she couldn't hide anymore. Then, she said, don't expect me to stop you. The next evening, he told himself he wouldn't go. He lasted until dusk. The cafe lights were dim, amber against the deepening blue outside. A storm was building again, thunder murmuring somewhere far off, low and restless. Elena was wiping down the counter when he walked in. She didn't turn at first, but he saw the small movement, her shoulders pausing mid-motion, her hand tightening just slightly around the cloth. You're getting predictable, she said, her voice quieter than usual. Maybe I like it here. Maybe you shouldn't. Her words were sharp, but her eyes softened as she looked at him. A war between logic and something that didn't want to be logical at all. He stepped closer, just enough to catch the scent of her perfume, faint jasmine and rain. I didn't come for the coffee, he said. I know. The silence after that stretched too long. He could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the soft drumming of rain beginning again outside. She reached for a cup, her hand steady, though her breathing wasn't. You think this is a game, she said finally. No, he answered. That's the problem. When she looked up, their faces were close enough for him to see the faint smudge of ink on her thumb. The way her pupils widened before she blinked. Don't, she whispered. He didn't know what it meant. Don't speak, don't move, don't want this, but he froze all the same. Then the bell over the door jingled. A man stepped inside, shaking off an umbrella. Mid-50s, confident, wearing the kind of familiarity that made Nathan's stomach tighten. Elena, the man greeted warmly. Didn't expect you to open this late. Her tone changed instantly, lighter, practiced. Just finishing up, Tom. The storm caught me. Tom's eyes flicked to Nathan. New hire. Just a friend, she said too quickly. Nathan forced a smile, nodded, and pretended to check his phone. Tom chatted easily, talking about local news, about some community event she'd apparently forgotten to attend. Elena nodded, laughed at the right times, but her hands betrayed her, fingers tapping restlessly against the counter. When Tom finally left, she exhaled, leaning back against the wall. He's your ex-husband, she finished. He still drops by. Her voice cracked slightly at the end. Nathan said nothing. He just looked at her, really looked, the way she stared at the door long after it closed, as if waiting for the past to stop following her. She turned toward him then, eyes glistening but unbroken. You shouldn't have seen that. I'm glad I did. Her breath caught a soft, trembling sound. He stepped closer, slow, careful, until there was almost nothing left between them. She didn't move away this time. For a heartbeat, they hovered there, the world small, the air too thick. His hand brushed hers. Her pulse quickened beneath his fingertips. Then, just as he leaned in, lightning flashed through the window, a sudden white glow that split the silence. She flinched back, whispering, Nathan, please. But he couldn't tell if she meant stop or don't stop. The rain fell harder, hammering against the glass. And between them, that inch of air that still kept them apart felt more dangerous than any touch. The next night, the cafe was closed, lights dimmed, chairs stacked, rain sliding down the windows like melted glass. Nathan should have been home. He wasn't. He stood outside for a long time before knocking. Once, twice. Then, faint footsteps. When the door opened, Elena stood in the half-light, barefoot, her hair undone, a sweater slipping from one shoulder. She didn't look surprised. Maybe she'd been expecting him. "You can't keep showing up like this," she said softly. "I know. Then why are you here?" He searched for an answer that wouldn't sound foolish. None came. "Because not being here feels worse." Her breath faltered. "You don't mean that." "I do." She stepped back just enough to let him in. "You shouldn't." He crossed the threshold anyway. The room smelled like rain and warm sugar, the last of the pastries cooling on the counter. She turned away, busying herself with nothing, moving dishes that didn't need moving. "I saw Tom today," he said. Her hands froze. "And he still loves you." "That's not love," she said quietly. "That's a habit." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then what is this?" She didn't turn around. This is a mistake waiting to happen. But her reflection in the window told another story. The way her shoulders tensed, the way her hand lifted unconsciously to her chest, as if to steady her heartbeat. He reached out, slowly, fingers brushing the edge of her sleeve. The fabric was warm, soft, alive with her. "You keep saying it's wrong," he murmured. "Then why do you let me stay?" She turned then, too quickly, and they were suddenly too close. Her hair brushed his hand, and he felt it like a spark. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "Maybe because you look at me like I'm still wanted." "You are." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "You don't know what you're saying." He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to be near enough that she could feel his breath when he whispered, "I do." Lightning flickered again outside. The air smelled of thunder and coffee grounds. Elena's eyes opened, glassy, torn between fear and something she'd tried to bury for years. "This isn't fair to you," she whispered. "Then be unfair," he said. Her laugh broke halfway through, soft and bitter. "You're too young to talk like that. And you're too brave to keep pretending." The silence that followed was unbearable, the kind that begged to be broken by touch or by truth. Finally, she whispered, "If you don't leave now, I won't stop you next time." He stared at her, the curve of her mouth, the tremor at her jaw, the storm reflected in her eyes. "Then maybe that's why I came." She looked at him like she was memorizing his face, every detail, every line, as if she knew she shouldn't. Outside, thunder rolled, deep and low. Inside, she took one step forward, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath, then stopped, lips parted, heart unguarded. The clock ticked once, and before either could move, the sound of keys jingled at the door. Both froze. Her eyes widened. He's back. The doorknob turned, slowly, deliberately, and everything they hadn't done yet hung trembling in the air, seconds away from shattering. The door swung open, and a gust of cold air rushed in. It wasn't Tom. A young woman, early 20s, dark hair pulled into a careless bun, stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were sharp. "Mom." Elena went still. Her breath caught, barely audible, but enough. Nathan's stomach dropped. The girl's gaze flicked from her mother to him, the sweater slipping from Elena's shoulder, the way she stood too close to a stranger in a locked cafe after hours. "I thought you said you closed early tonight," the girl said slowly. Elena found her voice, but it sounded too careful. "I did. Nathan was just leaving." The lie hung there, thin as glass. Nathan stepped back, pulse pounding. I should go." "No," Elena said, too fast, then softer. "It's fine." But our daughter had already seen too much. The flush on her mother's neck, the tremor in her hand when she reached for the counter. "Is this why you never visit?" the girl asked, eyes narrowing. "Because you're busy?" "Don't," Elena whispered. "Please." Nathan wanted to speak, to explain, but what was there to say? "I didn't know she was your mother?" It would only make it worse. He met Elena's eyes, wide, terrified, pleading, and everything inside him twisted. Her daughter stormed past, grabbing her phone, her words low and sharp. "You don't even know what you're doing." "He's my age, Mom." The word Mom hit harder than thunder outside. Elena's composure cracked then, a quiet gasp, a tremor running through her as she pressed her hand to her temple. When the door slammed behind her daughter, silence collapsed in its wake. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain streaked down the window, the cafe humming faintly under the weight of what had just happened. She wasn't supposed to come, Elena said finally. Her voice was almost a whisper. She never visits without calling. Nathan took a breath, stepped forward. Elena, I didn't. I know, she said quickly, her tone breaking between control and collapse. It's not your fault. It's mine. She sank into a chair, fingers trembling against the edge of the table. You were just easy to be around. You listened. You looked at me like I wasn't invisible. He crouched beside her, his voice soft but certain. You're not invisible. Her eyes lifted to meet his, raw, wet, searching. You don't understand. I spent years pretending to be fine. And tonight, for the first time, I almost forgot I was supposed to be lonely. Nathan reached out, his hand brushing hers. She didn't pull away this time. The sound of their breaths filled the space, uneven, tangled. I can't lose her, she whispered. But I can't. She stopped, the rest swallowed by silence. He understood anyway. I won't make you choose, he said. She looked at him then, tears unshed but shining. It's too late. You already did. Outside, the storm intensified, a hard, relentless rhythm against the glass. And in that moment, what once felt forbidden now felt dangerous, not because of guilt, but because of how much it suddenly mattered. The cafe felt smaller that night. No lights, just the faint glow from the street lamps outside, turning the windows into mirrors. Elena sat alone at a corner table, untouched cup beside her, a storm still moving in the distance. When Nathan walked in, she didn't look up. She must have heard his steps. He always walked softly, like he didn't want to disturb her world. You shouldn't be here, she said. He stopped by the door. You said that every time. This time I mean it. Then tell me to leave. Her silence was his answer. He crossed the room, slow, deliberate. She didn't move until he was close enough for her perfume to find him again. Faint, familiar, like a memory that refused to fade. Her voice cracked. She won't speak to me. She will, he said. Give her time. Elena shook her head, tears glinting in the dim light. No, Nathan. She saw me as something I'm not. And now, she sees me exactly as I am. He crouched beside her, his hand resting on the back of her chair. And how's that? Lonely, she whispered. Selfish. He smiled faintly, though his voice trembled. Or human. She looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her broke. You don't know what you're asking for. You'll wake up one day and realize I was a mistake. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her cheek. Then let me make it. The distance between them dissolved. Her hand rose, hesitating midair before touching his face, softly, as if afraid he might disappear. He closed his eyes, breathing in the moment like oxygen. Every time you walk in, she murmured, I forget how to be careful. Then stop being careful, he said. She laughed once, unsteady. You make everything sound simple. It is, he said, his voice. Barely a whisper. We just complicate it. She turned toward him, slowly, achingly slow, until her lips hovered a breath away. Neither moved. The air between them pulsed with everything unsaid, the risk, the guilt, the want. Her fingers slid down his neck, resting against his heartbeat. If I let this happen, she said, there's no going back. He looked at her, steady, certain. There already isn't. And that was the moment. The one they'd been circling for weeks. Every silence, every stolen glance leading here. She leaned in, her lips brushing his, barely touching, trembling with restraint. Then she stopped, inches apart, eyes open. I can't lose myself again, she whispered. He swallowed, his voice breaking. Then find yourself with me. For a breath, she let the idea exist, fragile, alive, impossible. Then she pulled away, just enough to steady herself. You should go. He nodded, though his hand lingered on hers a heartbeat too long. I'll still come back, he said quietly. Her eyes softened, equal parts ache and understanding. I know. As he walked into the rain, she stood by the window, watching until he disappeared into the blur of streetlights. Her hand pressed to the glass, her reflection split by raindrops, half shadow, half hope. And though she didn't say it out loud, her smile, small, trembling, unstoppable, told the rest of the story. Days passed before either of them reached out. The storm had long cleared, but its weight still hung between them. Unspoken, electric. It was a quiet Sunday when Nathan finally returned. The cafe was open again, sunlight spilling through clean windows, the air filled with the faint hum of music. Elena stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, her hair tied loosely back. She looked different, not guarded this time, just tired in a peaceful sort of way. When she saw him, she didn't flinch. She smiled. A small, uncertain smile that felt like forgiveness. "You came back," she said softly. "I told you I would." She nodded. Once, the corners of her mouth lifting. "I half expected you wouldn't." "I half expected the same." They both laughed, quiet, tentative laughter that felt like breathing after too long underwater. He sat by the window, and she brought him coffee without asking. No words, just the familiar clink of the cup against the saucer. "Your daughter?" he asked carefully. Elena's hand hesitated on the cup's edge, but her voice stayed calm. "She called yesterday. We talked. Is she okay?" "She's angry," she admitted, "but she'll come around. She always does." Nathan looked at her, searching for guilt or regret. Instead, he found something else, peace. She met his gaze, steady and open. "You were never the problem," she said. "You were just the reminder that I'm still allowed to feel." He smiled, unsure what to do with the ache that bloomed in his chest. "And you? What about me? Do you still think this is wrong?" Her answer came slowly, like she was testing each word before letting it go. "Maybe not wrong," she said finally. "Just complicated. But I've lived long enough to know that being complicated isn't always bad." He stood then, crossing to her side of the counter. She didn't step back this time. Their hands found each other naturally, her fingers tracing the edge of his palm, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist where her pulse raced, fast but steady. Neither said a word for a long time. They didn't need to. The sunlight caught her face just right, softening the lines around her eyes. She looked up at him, smiling in that quiet, private way she did when she didn't want to ruin a moment by naming it. He leaned forward, resting his forehead gently against hers. No urgency, no fear, just stillness. "You make everything feel new," she whispered. "You make it feel real," he answered. Her eyes closed, her smile deepening. "Then maybe we will finally stop running from it." He nodded, barely, and kissed her forehead. A slow, tender promise rather than a beginning or an end. Outside, the world moved as it always did, ordinary and indifferent. But inside the cafe, time felt suspended. Elena turned off the open sign, her hand still in his. They didn't need to decide what came next. They had already chosen, quietly, completely, in every look, every pause, every time they hadn't walked away. And as the rain began again, gentle this time, she leaned against him and whispered, "Stay a while." He did. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? More slow burn romance, emotional age gap love stories, or something entirely different?